I had a front row for Mougey. Here's Darren Mougey staring into my soul in the front row of this presser here. But here were some of the things I thought were interesting from Mougey. The biggest thing and the one that will get the most news is Breece Hall is not going anywhere. Mougey essentially said they will use the franchise tag or the transition tag. Didn't definitively say which one, but they will use one of the tags on Breece if they can't get a long-term deal. So I asked Mougey, I go, does Breece want to be a Jet, right? Because the Jets could put the tag on him and they could keep him. But there's a lot of people out there who think through Breece's body language or some of his tweets in the past, does he actually want to be here? And Mougey says that he got the feeling from talking with Breece and his representatives that he does want to remain a Jet. So take that for what it's worth. Now, I agree with this. You can't lose Breece for nothing. Breece is not going to be a free agent. They are going to put a franchise tag, I believe, on him when push comes to shove. If they were to use the transition tag, what is stopping another team from making an offer that prices out what the Jets were willing to pay? If you want Breece here, you either get a long-term deal done, which I would have no problem if the Jets signed Breece Hall to a contract that essentially would guarantee him 2 years, or you use the franchise tag for around $14.3 million. I don't believe, based on what I know, I don't believe that it would be smart for the Jets to use the transition tag, because I think there's other teams out there that would make an offer and the Jets maybe wouldn't match it. And if you're going to lose the player because you're worried of someone else making an offer, that's too big of a risk, right? Just use the franchise tag instead of having to pay Breece 11 point something. It's now 14 point something. For the extra $3 million, you guarantee yourself the player. So it's either they get a deal done or I think they use the franchise tag. Because the transition tag, is it likely that someone makes an offer that the Jets would then have to match? Is it likely someone even makes an offer? I'm not sure. I don't want to take the chance, though. Again, I'm looking it up right now just to be accurate here. Transition tag for a running back is $11.72 million. Franchise tag for a running back is $14.53 million. For the extra $3 million, when you have all these other needs, just keep Breece. For the difference of $3 million, keep him. Now, if Breece says, I won't play on the tag, tough, you're a running back. And by the way, 14.3 is probably more money than he would get on a per-year basis from a different team. I don't know if anyone is going to give Breece Hall more money than that. That'd be surprising. So there's that as well. Some of the other things I wrote in my notes here from Mougey. When he was asked specifically about trading up for the number one pick, he essentially laughed at the idea, saying it's not going to happen. So we could put together whatever concocted trade proposal you want to try and put together. The idea that the Jets are going to be able to make some sort of deal with the Las Vegas Raiders to come up and get Fernando Mendoza, that ship has sailed. Again, when Kubiak took that job, he took that job to coach Mendoza as his quarterback. So Mougey was asked about trading up, and he has a relationship with John Spytek, who's the GM of the Raiders. He says he speaks with GMs, including Spytek, all the time. He smiled and said, quote, I don't think that's happening, though. So there you go. When asked about Fields, he said he's under contract, and there's no trigger date that forces them to have to trade Justin Fields. So Fields right now, because he's under contract, they don't need to do anything. Right? They could designate him with a June 1st release, and that will save them some money if they want to go down that route. But there's no concrete deadline where, first day of the new league year, like his contract becomes guaranteed. Like his contract is the contract. That's where you hear the term like no trigger dates. So he's here. Nick Faria, shout out to him, asked a good question of Mougey, says they will consider bringing in a quarterback that fits what Frank Reich would prefer at the position. So that obviously means taller, big arm, however you want to define that. That was something that apparently Frank Reich looks for in a QB, but the Jets are got to be obviously very fluid with their options here, but I don't think Kyler Murray, for example, is going to be a Jet. Asked about AVT, again, he said they're interested. They're still working through both him and Simpson, so that was kind of like a non-answer. Like with Breece, it's like, we're going to bring him back. It's either going to be signed or we're going to use the tag. With AVT and Simpson, it was way more like, we're kind of working through that right now. To me, it sounded like Will McDonald was going to get his fifth-year option picked up, which I think is the right move. He's a pass rusher. If he has a breakout year with better coaching now with Glenn calling the defense, you're going to want to keep him under contract for that extra year. So to me, that was a no-brainer as well in terms of the Will McDonald 5th-year option. In fact, I wrote down the quote from Mougey: "We feel good about Will and that being a possibility." So again, I'd be surprised if Will McDonald does not get his 5th-year option that's picked up. But I'm curious how the fans who saw the presser, what your big takeaways were. It's kind of tricky when you're actually in it. Like, what's the quote that's making the most headlines? And I think the superpower quote from Glenn, that play calling is my superpower, I think that's the early contender for what I have seen, has made the most news, besides the obvious with Breece Hall, the fact that he's not going anywhere. The Jets will use the tag if they can't get some sort of long-term deal worked out with Breece. So that's kind of where things stand from my vantage point. Again, I thought Mougey offered some good insight. I thought he had good control of the room for what it's worth. None of this matters. At the end of the day, as we know, they got to win games. That's it. They got to be a lot better. In fact, I actually asked Mougey at the end of the presser, one of the last questions, I go, you talked about how you want to be a lot more competitive this year, but you also have the 3 firsts in 2027. So I was essentially asking, well, how do you balance trying to be a lot better, knowing that you also have like these 3 firsts in 2027? And he said that we will be a lot better this upcoming year, and it's nice to have those 3 firsts, but we're all focused on 2026. And he's like, I love the draft capital that we have this year as well. So again, we've heard this from different coaches and GMs, and until it changes, fans have every right to remain skeptical about this team. But ultimately, I'll give Aaron Glenn this. I did like the fact that he took a lot of accountability at the beginning of his press conference. Fitting to see Aaron Glenn up there at the podium, because about an hour ago, he was up at the podium talking about the state of his football team. We're back here at the NFL Scouting Combine, and my guest is Zack Rosenblatt, who covers the New York Jets for The Athletic. Zack, you and I were both there watching Aaron Glenn and Darren Mougey address the media. You asked several questions to each. Let's just start with the biggest takeaway from Glenn. What stood out to you?
I think we all knew it was coming, but I think just the way he was talking about play calling and his thought process with that felt like the biggest, most notable thing. I know he was criticized by a lot of people, including me, about the process they took to get to this point. I think it was probably ultimately the right destination, and I think he did a good job of explaining his thought process and all that stuff. Like, you can still, maybe, I don't know if everybody believes all of it, like the wink stuff and all that stuff, but I do think him taking over play calling and why he's doing it and why he hired Brian Duker, like, it all just makes sense when you lay it out. And so I think for him, it might have done him a service if he had spoken sooner about like his thought process and all that stuff, because this is like over a month after it all happened. But yeah, I think that's the biggest news, the biggest takeaway, I think.
So your question to Glenn also gave us the best quote about his play calling being his superpower. For those who missed it, I was able to pull it. Here's Zach's question to AG.
Why did you ultimately decide you wanted to call plays again? And then what would you say about like how much different the defense will look if you fully on that?
To me, play call is my superpower, really. Doing it for 4 years in Detroit, and man, just look at the maturation of those 4 years of how we improved every year and how I improved as a play caller. I really miss doing that, and I think it's a huge part of helping us become the team that I see us become, the team that I knew Mougey see us becoming, the team that Woody sees us becoming. So that was a huge part of that, and I don't want to second guess that. And I will go back when I say the mistakes that I made. I'm not going to make that same mistake, and I feel like I need to do that when it comes to the team. When it comes schematically, who we're going to be, man, we have a number of guys on defense that's going to help be able to build that. And that's the fun part about being around these men, is building a defense that I think that that's going to actually put the players in position to be successful. And this is not my defense. This is going to be the New York Jets defense. And everybody on that side is going to be a huge part as far as building next. So I'm excited about that.
Okay. Play calling, his superpower. I mean, I thought you made a good point. Maybe how we got here was bumpy, but I do think Glenn, as the play caller, almost like in that answer, they're saying, like, if I'm going down doing what I love. I don't have a problem with that. I just wonder, like, what's the real story? Because it felt like there was a lot from Glenn when even today, like the defending Woody Johnson for some of the narratives that are out there. Well, these narratives are out there because in the past, a lot of these things have turned out to be true.
Yeah, and he kind of like alluded this at the start of, because he was asked about Woody, and at the beginning of his answer, he's like, there's, when you win, certain narratives go away, and there's narratives about the Jets and about Woody Johnson that I wish weren't there. But the reality is those are the narratives because it's happened in the past. Like Woody has interjected, and everybody you talk to, like around Glenn and obviously close to Woody, they all like vehemently like defend, like, no, he did not force him to do anything. And, you know, the only ones that really know the answer to that are the people who are in that room in Palm Beach, or Woody and him and Jaime and Mougey and whoever else was in there. They're the only ones who know the real answers, but they insist that, you know, this was my call. Something they've talked about both at the podium and privately is that, like, when he fired Steve Wilkes and Chris Harris took over, like, he got way more involved with the defense. And even Mougey was like, there was like a different energy about him, like something was different. So Mougey like said in his head, like, I thought this was going to be a possibility. Like, we went through the interview process, and it still felt to me like as we went on that I thought Aaron Glenn was going to call plays. And there's something to that. Like, you even heard, not to bring up Robert Saleh, also always talked about superpowers. But he since he came to Tennessee has talked about, like, he did feel like not calling plays, like he felt disconnected from the players and stuff. And Aaron Glenn today was like, you know, I miss being able to talk to the mic during the game, the middle linebacker, which all I can think in that moment is like Alex Anzalone.
I was about to say,
yeah.
You can put the tweet in your drives right now.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, to what you're saying, like, I think it's okay to talk about both sides of it. Like, okay, maybe we don't all understand like why the process went the way it did, the timeline and all that stuff. But the destination ultimately was the right move. I do think it's the right move for him to call plays. To his point, like, it's why he got this job. The Lions defense that last year was its best version of itself, and he doesn't have 4 years to figure it out here. But I'm very curious to see how this looks, how aggressive they are, and, you know, if he can turn it around, because he's putting it on himself. He's putting it on his shoulders.
If you guys have a question for Zack during this conversation, super chat it in. Reminder, $10 super chats will get you in the raffle. We added a third prize to our weekly raffle this week. Name It signed helmet, Revis signed helmet, Garrett Wilson signed football, our third prize in the weekly raffle. You know, I did think it was interesting how Glenn started his presser basically saying that, like, last year was unacceptable. He learned a lot. Like, he did show a lot of accountability in that moment, and I could speak as a fan. I know I certainly I've been as tough on Glenn as anyone. And I did appreciate that, hearing that, you know, before he really started to address the current team.
Yeah, it seems like he thinks the biggest mistake he made is not calling plays, honestly. Like, if you hear the way he talks about it, he's like, I'm not making that mistake again. He didn't get to many other specifics, and I know there was a lot of things that he learned on the fly. And I thought in his season-ending press conference, I thought it was interesting where he kind of like admitted, like, a lot of mistakes I made were because I was a first-time head coach, essentially, was what he said, which is not the way he carried himself when he first got here. And so
it was a way different tone at the podium this year than last year.
For sure. And so what I would say is, like, and I know a lot of fans are skeptical of him. I have my skepticism, but the hope is he learned the right lessons from last year. And so if he learned the right lessons and maybe he has the right staff now, maybe they're going on the right path. But, you know, then you're balancing the fact that, like, we're so bad last year that you need to take a pretty decent jump to prove to anybody that you deserve this job. So there's a lot he still has to prove and show, and this offseason is going to be huge, and who their quarterback is and stuff. But I think it would be okay to come away from that press conference more encouraged than maybe you guys as like fans have been in a while, I would say.
It was unfortunate that the presser, I feel like when it's like these national opportunities, it kind of gets hijacked by some of the questions that just aren't relevant to like what the fans actually care about. But some of the other takeaways I had just listening to him, it was like briefly mentioned about Frank Reich, but Mougey was asked more about like Frank Reich's role in the quarterback process. But I really would have loved to have like been able to like ask Aaron Glenn specifically, like, hey, like, you guys made this Justin Fields choice. Like, you backed him, said that this was your guy. What did you learn from that? And like, how involved is Frank Reich now going to be as a former quarterback and experienced offensive guy in like the next process of selecting a quarterback?
I think it's pretty clear Frank is going to be pretty heavily involved in that process. I mean, Mougey saying that was interesting, like him going out of his way to say that. So, and it makes sense. You're going to lean on Frank Reich. He has the relationships. He has the background. You know, whatever you think about how the play calling will look and how is Frank going to do in terms of like building a modern offense? Like, I think those are fair concerns to have, but I trust his evaluation ability as like looking at quarterbacks. And so that's something that I know there's gonna be a lot of questions about, like, who the Jets guy is. Like, you see a lot of reporting, everybody like, oh, the Jets, watch out for Tanner McKee and Davis Mills. And
you could just name any quarterback and just say Jets.
I'm telling you right now, like, the Jets do not know who their top target is. Like, they're really evaluating right now. And that's kind of what Aaron, like, we talked about the timeline, and Aaron Glenn's like, the timeline, it was always the plan because I was evaluating. I was just evaluating the whole time. Like they're going to take their time to evaluate, and I think it is the right move. Like, and it's not a great offseason for a quarterback, so they really have to do their work on these guys. Like if it's Kyler Murray, you need to dig in. Like, okay, is all the attitude stuff, is that just because he's in Arizona? Like, can we get through to him? If it's Tanner McKee, like scouting his tape and like, do we see enough to where we can like, is this guy going to be our starter or whatever it is? Like they really need to dig into these guys, into their backgrounds, and come to the right conclusion. And you also need to wait to see who's going to be available. Like Kirk Cousins, we know is Geno Smith going to be available? Like who else is going to get cut? Who else is available on the trade market? How much would it cost? So that I really don't think they know who their next quarterback's going to be right now. I don't think they know who their number one target is right now. Whereas, a couple years ago when we were here, I probably was on your show. Like Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr was in the ether, but like when Rodgers became a possibility, it was like, okay, that's their number one target. There's no Aaron Rodgers for them to be like.
Even last year, it felt like we had a pretty good idea they were going to target Fields.
Yeah, especially because everybody was pointing out that he loved him when he coached against him, a lot of stuff. So yeah, I just it's really wide open, and it's hard for me even as like a writer trying to cover it. Like it's hard for me to like predict who the guy's going to be right now. Like as this week goes on, we'll try and figure it out. But I also don't think Aaron Glenn, say what you want about it. He really cares a lot about leaks and stuff getting out to the point where I don't know that he's even telling people in the building what he's thinking. So I think he's keeping him and Mougey have a plan, and I'm sure Reich is in on that and all that stuff, and they'll expand it outward as they go forward. But the only person that knows who Aaron Glenn wants is Aaron Glenn, and he's not just telling somebody who's going to go and tell some random reporter. So,
yep, I think it's totally fair.
Yeah.
Delray Doc with the super chat. He's not sold. Glenn told us absolutely nothing. Of course, you had to apologize for a record-breaking bad year. No reason to trust him. Look, I mean, it was bad, and we all understand that. I do wonder, and I tried to ask Mougey, basically a version of this question, but essentially, like, everyone's already talking about, hey, the 3 first-round picks in 2027, like, get the quarterback there. Like, no one even, acknowledges this. Like, you still got to get through this year to figure out where you're picking to even use some of those picks. Like, how do you balance needing to try and win a lot more games in 2026 just so you get the opportunity, if you're Aaron Glenn and even Darren Mougey, to actually be able to use the war chest of assets they've accumulated for that year?
It's going to be really interesting to see how they toe the line, because like the best way to succeed as a franchise is to not like make decisions where you feel like you're under pressure to. It's just to make the best decisions for the organization. But the way the NFL works is you're always on a clock. And so are they going to,
like if they're going to trade for a quarterback, like what is too much to trade for a 1-year bridge in all likelihood?
Yeah. It's really hard to figure out. Like, and if you trade for a Mac Jones, like, are you trading a second-round pick for him because he's your bridge, or do you think you have a chance to have your guy? Like, if it's only the bridge, and that means you're really just trying to win right now to save your jobs, kind of. So and they have so much money. How are they going to spend that money? Are you going to overspend on guys that you shouldn't? Once the Jets have gotten into this trap of in the past, obviously, where you overemphasize all this money you have and you spend it on guys who wind up not working out or being good fits. And I do think last year Mougey, not all the guys worked out, but he did a good job of like really shopping the middle of the market, not really, overextending yourself and signing long-term deals to anybody. And this is our first experience with them having this much of their assets at their hands. And I'm very curious to see how they approach it. I do think they're going to spend, I don't know if it's going to be at the top of the market or what that looks like. But
one of the things we did learn is that Breece Hall is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of what version of the tag they use, franchise tag or transition tag, or if they could work out a long-term deal. So Mougey confirmed that, and I wanted to ask him, well, we keep hearing about Breece. Does he want to be here? Body language, people look at his tweets and try to interpret that. So I asked him, I'm like, do you get the sense Breece wants to be here? And he said, yes, I do think Breece wants to be here. Is that just because he just wants an extension because he knows the Jets aren't going to let him go? Or from what you've heard, do you think there is a genuine desire to still remain a Jet if you're Breece Hall?
I think there's a desire from Breece to get as much money as he can, and I don't say that in a derogatory way. I think he would like to hit free agency, frankly, and that's not to say he doesn't want to come back to the Jets. But I've been reporting this for a few weeks now that the franchise tag was always likely. Like, especially they kind of were telling that was going to happen when they rejected all these trades for him at the deadline.
Right.
You don't do that and then turn around and just let him walk out the door.
It'd be poor asset management.
But the interesting part of what Mougey was saying, like, he really made it seem like we want him back. So it's not like we're going to tag him and then trade him. It's we want him back. And so hopefully we can come to a contract agreement. If not, we'll find other ways of bringing him back, which is one of the tags. And so him saying that, I wonder if that makes it more likely that it's franchise tag, but I don't say that with any like sort of specific knowledge, because the transition one, it's a little more easy to lose them because somebody can come in and blow them away with an offer, whereas franchise tag, that doesn't really happen because of the first round pick and third round pick and all that stuff. So yeah, Breece is going to be back, and it's funny because like throughout the season, it felt like it was like up and down. Like I felt like really confident at points that he was definitely coming back. Others that he wasn't. Then the trade deadline thing happens and he stays. And it's like, well, they kind of can't get rid of him now, or if they do, like, yeah, I don't know. So I think Breece will be back, and I think a big reason for that, frankly, is they don't really have many good players, and you just can't let guys walk out the door and create another hole that wasn't there before.
Well, this is a huge if because it's the Jets. But if they had competent quarterback play, it's not a bad place to start when you have Garrett Wilson, A.D. Mitchell, Mason Taylor, a solid offensive line. We'll get into the AVT and John Simpson aspect of it in a moment. But then you have Breece, you get Braylon Allen back. Isaiah Davis is a decent third down back. Like, if you actually had competent quarterback play, they're not bereft of talent on that side of the ball.
It's probably the best supporting cast Breece will have gone into a season with. Because if you think about it, he's produced while having a lot of like mess around. And we don't know who the quarterback is. Obviously, that'll be a big part of it. But yeah, I mean, that's a great baseline. If he doesn't want to sign a long-term deal, okay, if it's the transition tag, it's $11 million for 1 year, and then next year you let him walk. But for this year, as this coaching staff is trying to succeed, I think bringing him back is the best move, because there are interesting running backs in free agency, but I don't know that, like, are you really just going to let Breece walk and then sign Travis Etienne, who's like a slightly worse version of Breece? Or are you going to like go in the middle of the market and get like a Rashad White or a Rico Dowdle, like guys like that? Like, Breece is more dynamic than those guys ultimately.
It's only a 1 year commitment if you use the tag.
Commitment. So, and I don't think Breece is a star or anything like that. I think he's just a solid running back. And Frank Reich has done a pretty good job with running backs who can catch the ball too, which I know Jets fans have been dying for an OC who just gets him involved in the passing game. And I think Reich will do that. So, do
you think Frank Reich will admit week 7, week 8, hey, I didn't realize Breece could really catch passes out of the backfield?
How the hell does Hackett have a job again?
What's crazy is under LaFleur, like it always somehow relates to the Jets.
The LaFleurs are friends with him, so I think that's why.
But it's just wild that Hackett replaces Mike LaFleur with the Jets, now LaFleur as a head coach is hiring Hackett.
Not only that, but LaFleur's quote about it was like, there was nobody else I wanted. I'm like,
what?
You should have like wanted a few
There's got
options. Like,
anyone, please, high school coach.
God, I just can't. Like, the year and a half I had to cover him as a play caller, like I'll never forget. Like, there's nobody like Nate.
Everyone says he's a nice guy. Was he like rude to you guys behind the scenes at all?
We didn't talk to him about it. I wouldn't say he was rude. It was just the thing that like annoyed everybody, including fans. But they would be in the middle of having like the worst offense in the NFL, and he's coming to the press conferences being like, "Hey guys, happy Thanksgiving! Like, how's your day going? Great weather outside." We're like, "What?" So like it was just like the way he would talk so much and say nothing. Like there was one quote he had. Somebody brought up like a bad stat about the passing game or something, and he's like, "Oh, there's good stats and some stats that are really good. Like,
I remember that quote.
There's bad stats, and those are bad stats, but like there's a lot of like good teams and bad teams in the NFL, and there's just stats." It was like something like, I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. Like if there were multiple reporters, like I don't know if I can do this anymore, man.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mentioned the guard situation. Mougey, when Breece, it was we're bringing him back. Said we're gonna use the tag. When I asked about the guards, we're still kind of evaluating all that, which could be code for, both are gone or one's gone, and you don't want to tip your hand one way or another. Who's more likely to be back in your opinion? What is the latest?
I've always leaned towards AVT, and maybe that's more of a personal thing, because I personally think he would be the one to bring back, and I know there's risk attached to that. I just think the ceiling of your O-line's higher with him than with John Simpson. They really like John in terms of he's a real good veteran. He fits what they want. He has the toughness that you need on this team. They don't have enough guys like him who are just going to like fight till the end of the whistle and things like that. But I don't know. I don't think they've made a decision there, and it partially depends. Like I think John Simpson, feel pretty confident, would want to come back. I don't know that I'm 100% sure AVT's like, I would definitely want to go back to the Jets. I would say so. That's going to be an interesting thing that plays out of these next couple of weeks.
And if they tag Breece, you can't use the tag on
exactly. So
AVT or Simpson.
And I don't know that you would want to pay either of them that much on a tag anyway. And AVT, if he hit the market, like he's a fascinating free agent to me.
I've had a couple people come up to me already this week being like, what's the deal with AVT?
Like, you could convince me that he either is going to get like a small prove it deal, or you can convince me somebody's going to be like, good offensive line, we don't hit free agency, so we're going to overpay him and hope that he just is healthy. So like I can see all of this playing out, and if the latter is the case, the Jets probably wouldn't bring it back, because you're not going to pay AVT $15 million a year knowing what you know about his injury history. But if you can get him on a 1-year deal for however much money with incentives and all that stuff, I think that is the best case scenario.